What's up and welcome to Shark Jets. I'm SkidViz. In this video, I'm going to break down how I made my Contra VR prototype in Unity. Before we get started, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my new stuff. And okay, now that that's taken care of, let's jump right in. Alright, so the idea for this project comes from the NES classic Contra. If you remember that game, on the second level, it switched over to this this 3D perspective, this fake 3D perspective. And I thought, what would this look like if it was made today and it was actually in 3D? So I needed very simple graphics. As you can see here, it's just like a tunnel, like a little room. And although it doesn't show where the enemies are coming from, it shows that they're coming from the side. As you zoom into the level, you don't actually see any doors or anything, so they're like literally coming out of the wall. As you can see here, there's no doorway for them to come out. So I went with this model, and I needed to pull up some graphics that, well, one, wouldn't cost me anything, and two, kind of look like this a little bit. And so I went to the Unity asset store, and I just pulled up snaps. I believe that's what they're called, snaps, yeah. And I found, I used the sci-fi prototype here, which didn't cost anything, and it had just what I needed so that I could build this little environment for the level, as you can see here. I put a bunch of light sources all over the place, did some line renderers for the lasers, and there's also a collider under the beams so that the player can't move forward and the beams actually keep the player in place. In the video, as you saw, there's only 2 lasers, but I needed 3 lasers because this wasn't providing enough cover for our bullets. And so everything, as you can see, is just from that Snaps project. With the exception of these fluorescent lights, I got those from the Office setting Snaps project. So there's another one. I think it's the first one that came out here. Yeah, this Office prototype one had the fluorescent lighting, so I used that from there. But everything else should be coming from the sci-fi one. Like I said, the lasers are just line renderers with some random red texture that I found in my textures folder. And then these turrets were also found on the asset store. I went ahead and just did a search for turrets, I believe. Turrets. Took that, and luckily it comes in pieces, so I was able to go ahead and assemble it to look like it's coming out of the wall, but it's actually supposed to be floor mounted. And then so that's the turret part of it, and then I put a little collider around that so that it would register when it gets shot. This little orb thingy also comes from the Snaps kit. And then I also loaded, of course, the OVR player for Oculus integration, OVR player controller. And I threw some guns in there in each hand. As you can see, there's 2 of them, but you can only see one because they're actually stacked on top of each other. And then I also put a little box collider around the center eye anchor. And that box collider is actually what is registering as your head. So that's the target. Now when I start this, you'll see that the enemies will be shooting this little invisible laser. Let me just switch over here. So you see everyone's shooting out that little green laser. You can't see that when you're actually playing, but what they're doing is they're targeting the camera, that center camera, and they're trying to shoot at it. So that makes sure that they're always shooting you no matter where you move in the game. And then I also created a couple spawners, one in each one of these side rooms, that is going to spawn an enemy drone at some point. There it is. There we go. And that little wobble that the drone is doing, that was very difficult for me to figure out. I had to do with lots of math. And they time out, they fly out of the scene, but they will time out after a little bit so that it's not wasting too much memory. And that's that. And so the way the code works is pretty simple as well. Well, I created a scene manager. Let me just stop this from playing real quick. All right, so I created a scene manager object, which contains should probably be called a game manager instead of scene manager, because there's actually something in Unity called a scene manager, but I didn't know at the time, so I created something called scene manager, but it should be called game manager for future reference. And this is basically the traffic officer that's directing everything and being in control here of what's going on. And so we've got a turret count to let us know how many turrets are available. Is core available will let us know whether or not the turrets are dead and you can shoot the middle component. Win screen is what happens when you win, and your score is of course your score. I've created a couple of action events here, so those will be triggered by different scenarios. So for instance, on game win happens when you've defeated all 3 turrets and the center eyeball there. So when you've killed everyone there, that triggers the on game win, and that does several things. For one, it will bring up the win game block of code here, which will track your score and set the win screen to true, to active, so that you can see the fireworks that happens at the end of the level. And also every event or every enemy that's available, for instance, we got a script here called is that the right one? No, bullet life cycle. So every bullet that is being shot by the enemy, when you win the game, all the bullets disappear. So you don't want to have stray bullets killing you after the game is over. So that when that event gets triggered, that on game win, it will destroy all the bullets. The same thing with any flying drones that are flying around. Same thing, when you win the game, they respond to that event and they destroy all the turrets that are out there, all the drones. So the scene manager, like I said, it coordinates everything. It's got that on game win. When the player dies, it triggers another event that basically restarts the level. On player hit is whenever the player gets hit, it tracks that information as well. There is a power-up in the game if you've played it. It is on SideQuest, I forgot to mention that. But if you get the turrets the drones that are flying around, if you shoot one of them while you have your regular guns, they will drop a power-up which gives you the spread gun. And so that's what this on power-up is. Whenever you pick up that power-up, it triggers a bunch of things. And then every time the turrets die, the wall-mounted turrets, right? What happens is when the game first starts and they're instantiated, they add a number to this turret count. And so every time you kill one of them, it comes back and it decreases that turret count. And if the turret count is equal to 0, then we move over to the phase 2, what I call phase 2, which is where you can shoot this center node here. So it's checking to see if there are no more turrets on the walls, then you can shoot this thing. And that's what that does. It's all pretty simple. The hardest parts, I think, for me were figuring out how to shoot where the player is by getting, the player's position and having the enemy look towards where the player is, And then doing the collision detection was also pretty complicated, as far as trying to use the built-in collision detection wasn't working because the bullets were traveling too quick. So we needed to do raycasting. So that's in my bullet lifecycle script, which is attached to every bullet, whether it's my bullets or the enemy bullets, which I'm calling cannonballs. My own bullets are bullets and the enemy bullets are cannonballs. So here's where we're doing that raycast. We're shooting a ray from where we are to where we were in the last frame. And if we've collided with anything, then we iterate through all those items. The first thing we do is destroy the bullet when it collides with anything. And then if it's a cannonball and it's colliding with the main camera, which is actually the center eye camera, that collider that I said was your head. So if these two collide, then we trigger that player hit event over on the scene manager. Also, if it's a regular bullet and it collides with an enemy, then the enemy takes damage, and we pass the coordinates to where it was. That way we can launch some fireworks whenever an enemy gets hit. All in all, very simple stuff, not a lot of complicated stuff going on, other than this block here for the collision detection, which I think was the bulk of my time spent working on this. I just kept trying to use the built-in physics, and it was not working. It would register collision probably half the time. As you can see here, another thing that happens on game win, this is attached to the barriers. So whenever the game win is initiated, it disables the box collider so that you can go ahead and freely move around the level, as well as disabling the line renderer so that you don't see the laser anymore. The drone code, as I mentioned, has an enum that decides which side of the room it's coming out of. If it's coming from the left side, then the drone needs to move to the left, and if it's coming from the right side, then the drone needs to come from the right. So very simple. Again, the complicated part here was doing the wobble effect, which is this line right here, where we're doing some kind of sine wave, basically, to make it go up and down. I'm not good at the maths, so I didn't actually create this. I found this on the internet somewhere, but it did the job once I figured out what the amplitude was and the frequency. So that was rather difficult for me to figure out, and I'm glad someone else did it for me. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Pretty simple. It took me about 4 days to get this amount of progress. Given that I didn't know what I was doing half the time. But I was pretty pleased with it, and I posted it on Reddit, and other people were pretty pleased too. If you'd like to try it out, please follow the link that's in the description. It's available on SideQuest. It's just one level, but if you beat it, there's a little bonus in there for you to find. And of course, the Konami code is in here, so if you're on your quest, you feel free to do the Konami code and see what that gives you. And there you have it. If you found this video useful, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. And if you'd like access to the source code, please consider joining our Patreon and becoming a Patreon subscriber by following the links in the description. Thanks again for watching. I'm SkidViz. Peace out.